Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something, well, fundamental to how we interact, but maybe something we don't always think about deeply. Insults.
That's right. And we've pulled together a whole stack of really fascinating sources. We're going to explore not just what insults are, but their surprising anatomy, how they're built, and the profound impact they have on us.
Our aim here is to give you, our listener, a solid grasp of this, something we all run into. We want to distill the really key insights without, drowning you in jargon.
Think of it as your quick path to getting properly informed about this universal experience.
It is pretty remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Insults are just everywhere, across time, cultures, demographics.
Absolutely. Young, old, it doesn't matter. You'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who hasn't been on one side or the other of an insult.
Which kind of makes you wonder, why? And maybe you've thought about this too. Why do some insults sting so much? Like they stick with you, while others just, roll off your back.
That's a great question. And how much power do we actually have in that equation? How much does our reaction shape the insult's power?
Exactly. Okay, so let's dig in. What fundamentally is an insult? Where do we even start defining it?
Good starting point. It's actually more layered than you might think. If we look at it psychologically, it's often defined as a deliberate expression. Disrespectful, offensive, maybe scornful or derogatory.
Okay, deliberate, with an intent.
Usually, yeah. The intent is often to belittle or offend or humiliate. But here's a key thing, the intent versus the perception. They don't always line up.
Meaning?
Well, you could say something completely innocently, right? No intent to offend. But the other person could still find it deeply insulting.
I see. And the other way around, too.
Exactly. Someone can try to land a jab and it just whiffs. Doesn't register as insulting to the target at all. So intention isn't the whole story.
So perception is key. What about from a language perspective? Linguistics.
Linguistically, yeah. An insult is often described as a disagreeable message. But crucially, it needs the target to perceive it that way for it to be effective.
So the receiver plays an active role.
A very active role. It often carries this sort of negative inference, something implied rather than stated outright. And frequently, it hints that the speaker thinks they're superior.
Right, like a power play hidden in the words.
Kind of. And the target has to sort of decode that negative meaning. It's almost like the offense is co-constructed. Some linguistic analyses even argue if the target doesn't get it as an insult, the attempt has failed.
Interesting. So it takes two to tango, insult-wise. What about sociology?
Sociologically, it's seen as pretty fundamental, actually. Lacan, the psychoanalyst, saw insults as central to how we understand social reality, our place in the imaginary order. A really basic form of aggressive communication.
Wow, fundamental.
Yeah, shaping social realities, power dynamics, often characterized as low-intensity, intentional, and illegitimate aggressive actions. It's not just random noise, it's doing something socially, even if it's negative.
Okay, so not just meaningless negativity, but part of the social fabric, however uncomfortable.
Precisely. And just circling back to the psychological view for a sec, insults are often seen as the lowest form of disagreement.
Lowest.
Because they tend to ditch rationality. They shut down dialogue and any chance of mutual understanding. Often, it signals the insulter lacks self-control or, frankly, doesn't have a solid argument.
So it's what you resort to when reason fails.
Often, yes. A personal attack instead of engaging with the issue.
Okay, that gives us a clearer picture of what an insult is.
Yeah.
But they come in so many different flavors, don't they? It's not just calling someone a name.
Oh, absolutely. We can break down the types. First, you've got your unintentional insults.
Like putting your foot in your mouth.
Exactly. Comes from carelessness, maybe a misunderstanding, sometimes cultural ignorance, maybe not tasting a dish your host made without realizing how much it means to them. No malice intended, but ouch.
Yeah, navigating those social minefields can be tricky.
Definitely. Then there are playful insults. Jocular ones. Think banter between close friends.
Right, where context is everything.
Totally context dependent. What's funny between mates could be really hurtful coming from someone else. It shows how the relationship shapes the meaning. Sometimes it even builds bonds, weirdly enough.
If there's that shared understanding, yeah. What else?
Backhanded compliments, those are sneaky.
Oh, I know these. Praise that isn't really praise.
Exactly. An insult wrapped up in seeming praise, often with a condescending little twist like, wow, I didn't expect you to ace that exam. Good for you.
Oof, yeah. The surprise is the insult.
Precisely. They can really sting because they're deceptive. Then you have straight up personal attacks ad hominem.
Targeting the person, not the argument.
Right. It's a classic logical fallacy. Instead of dealing with what someone's saying, you attack their character, their looks, whatever. It sidesteps the actual issue completely.
A way to dodge the debate.
Totally. We also see sexual insults, targeting sexuality, orientation, activity, often taps into some pretty nasty prejudices.
And family-related ones, too.
Yeah, maternal insults, yo ma mama, jokes, those play on ideas of family honor, trying to hit a nerve there.
Seems designed to provoke a strong reaction.
Definitely. And then the more direct stuff. Name-calling, using pejoratives, profanity, taunting, just plain rudeness. Those are pretty unambiguous.
No subtlety there.
Not much. And finally, something really important to mention, microaggressions.
Those subtle, often unintentional slights.
Exactly. Verbal, nonverbal. Targeting someone based on their membership in a marginalized group, like asking an Asian American, where are you really from? Any single one might seem minor.
But they add up.
They add up massively. The cumulative effect can be incredibly damaging, creating this constant feeling of being othered or devalued, often reflects unconscious bias.
That's a really important category. Any other ways to classify insults?
Yeah, Desmond Morris, the ethologist, looked at insult signals in terms of behavior actions done out of context, like showing boredom or superiority, mockery.
Like nonverbal put-downs.
Kind of. And psych research points to common themes insults hit, making someone feel useless or stupid or morally bad or just weird, peculiar.
Probing for insecurity.
Seems like it. And we also see intergroup insults targeting people because of their group, attacking identity, projecting negativity, focusing on differences, claiming unfairness, trying to reduce power or legitimacy.
Wow, it's a whole arsenal.
It really is. The source material actually synthesizes these in a table, just underscoring the sheer breadth of ways humans have found to insult each other.
Okay, so we've got a handle on the what and the how, but the why? What drives people to do this? What's the motivation behind insulting someone?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answers are, well, complicated, multiple factors.
Yeah.
A big one is asserting power or dominance.
Like verbal sparring for status.
Exactly. Insults can be tools to try and establish social rank. Elevate yourself by putting someone else down. From an evolutionary angle, you could argue higher status meant better access to resources, mates.
So navigating these social challenges, like dealing with insults, could actually impact your standing, your access to things.
Potentially, yeah. Successfully handling these situations, whether using insults strategically or deflecting them effectively, could influence social position and resource control. It's like a verbal jostle for place.
Establishing that pecking order you mentioned. What else?
Sometimes it's just poor emotional regulation, a quick, maybe satisfying in the moment, but ultimately dysfunctional way to vent anger or frustration.
Like letting off steam, but burning bridges in the process.
You got it. The intensity often reflects the anger level, but it kills productive conversation. A short-term release for the insulter maybe, but damaging overall.
A bad coping mechanism.
Definitely. Insults can also be a defense mechanism, reacting when you feel your plans or values or your self-image are under threat.
Lashing out when feeling vulnerable.
Could be. Sometimes it's about seeking attention, even negative attention, or trying to justify your own actions, escape responsibility by blaming someone else, making them feel bad instead, often linked to insecurity, low self-esteem.
Trying to build themselves up by tearing others down.
That's a common dynamic. And like we said before, sometimes it's just a lack of self-control or running out of rational arguments. When composure breaks or logic fails, insults become the fallback.
A sign of weakness in their position, often.
Often, yeah. Might also indicate cognitive rigidity and inability to engage flexibly in dialogue makes insults a more likely response when challenged.
Now, I remember wondering if insulting someone could relieve pain or even prolong life for the insulter. What's the thinking there?
Well, there's no direct evidence for, physiological pain relief or longer lifespan from insulting someone, but psychologically, maybe a temporary relief from feeling powerless or frustrated.
A fleeting sense of control.
Perhaps. And more broadly, effectively managing the stress caused by insults, maintaining your social connections, that definitely contributes indirectly to well-being and, you could say, social survival. It's not about literal lifespan extension via insulting, but navigating the social world effectively matters.
Right. It's about maintaining your place, your stability within the group.
Precisely. So you have this paradox, right? Insults often end communication, yet they are a form of aggressive social interaction, a way to negotiate status. And sometimes, like with ritualized insults in tight groups, they can even build cohesion.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
Depends heavily on context.
Absolutely. Serves various individual emotional needs, plays a role in social structuring, even if it's often a pretty flawed and damaging role.
It really makes you think about the actual impact. It goes beyond just a momentary sting, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The impact isn't just fleeting feelings. It can have really significant, long-lasting consequences on our psychological well-being, sure, but also physical health, relationships, even our development over time.
Let's start with the immediate hit, psychologically, emotionally. What happens right after an insult lands?
Reactions vary. Anger is common, obviously. Though, interestingly, showing anger can sometimes be seen as letting the insult win.
Right, like, ha, got ya.
Exactly. Shame and humiliation are really core impacts.
Yeah.
They strike right at your sense of self-worth, your dignity. Fear and anxiety can pop up too, especially if the insult feels threatening or comes from someone with power over you.
Like a boss or something.
Yeah. And if it comes from someone close, someone you trust, sadness, disappointment, that can feel like a real betrayal. The source matters hugely.
It cuts deeper from someone you care about.
Definitely. Sometimes people react with laughter, humor, might be a coping mechanism, deflecting the hurt, signaling you're not taking it seriously. But, the old saying applies. It's not a joke if no one's laughing.
True. What else?
Confusion, maybe, especially with ambiguous insults, backhanded compliments, or things that just don't make sense culturally. So a whole range of initial feelings.
But what about the longer-term fallout? If it's not just a one-off?
That's where it gets serious. Chronic exposure to insults, particularly verbal abuse, can really grind down your self-esteem. You might start internalizing those negative messages, believing them.
That sounds incredibly damaging.
It is. There's a strong link between ongoing verbal abuse and developing anxiety, depression. In severe cases, it can contribute to PTSD or complex PTSD. It's recognizing the trauma of sustained verbal attack.
Wow, PTSD from words.
Yes. Other long-term effects, feeling isolated, worthless, hopeless. It can create major trust issues, problems regulating emotions, especially if it started early in life.
Yeah.
People might turn to maladaptive coping substance use, eating disorder.
Trying to numb the pain.
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
And in the most extreme situations, verbal abuse has been linked to suicidal thoughts.
That's incredibly sobering, the power words can have.
It really is. And we need to remember the cumulative effect of those smaller things, too. The microaggressions, the casual put-downs.
The ones that might seem minor in isolation.
Exactly, but repeated constantly, day in, day out, especially for people in marginalized groups. The psychological distress builds up significantly. It can genuinely alter someone's life trajectory, their quality of life.
So the psychological toll is immense.
Yeah.
But you mentioned physical health, too. How does that connection work?
This is fascinating and really underlines why insults aren't just words. Neurobiology shows a surprising overlap between the brain circuits processing social pain, the hurt from rejection, insults, and those processing physical pain.
Wait, really? The same parts of the brain?
Significant overlap, yes. Areas like the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the anterior insula, they light up for both physical injury and social pain. It gives a biological basis for why words can literally hurt. How strongly someone reports feeling hurt often correlates with activity levels there.
So my brain registers that cutting remark kind of like stubbing my toe, metaphorically speaking.
In terms of activating some of the same distress circuits, yes. And interestingly, brain regions involved in regulating physical pain also seem to help us regulate and cope with social pain.
Why would that be, evolutionarily?
The theory is that our social pain system might have piggybacked on the older physical pain system. Why? Because social connection is absolutely vital for survival in a social species like ours. Feeling pain when those bonds are threatened acts like an alarm system. Stay connected or risk, well, not surviving.
A warning signal for social survival. Makes sense.
Exactly. And verbal insults, especially if they feel threatening or happen repeatedly, also kick our stress response systems into gear. The HPA axis, the SAM axis.
Adrenaline, cortisol, that whole fight or flight response.
Precisely. You get that release of stress hormones. Short term, that helps mobilize energy. But chronic activation, if you're constantly dealing with insults and verbal abuse, that takes a toll.
What kind of toll?
Long-term physical health issues, reporting increased risk of cardiovascular problems, weakened immune system, digestive issues, chronic pain, fatigue, sleep disturbances, appetite changes. The works. Chronic stress is bad news for the body.
So it really gets under your skin, literally.
Absolutely. And there might even be individual differences. Some people might be biologically more sensitive to rejection or negative social feedback. Things like rejection-sensitive dysphoria, sometimes linked to ADHD or BPD, might play a role. Individual thresholds vary.
So it's not just in our heads. Our bodies react profoundly.
Exactly. The neurobiological and physiological data really reframe insults. They're not just abstract concepts. They trigger deep-suited survival mechanisms similar to physical threats. It highlights just how serious chronic verbal abuse can be for our overall health and well-being.
It's quite staggering. And thinking beyond the individual, what about the ripple effects on relationships, on society?
Huge ripple effects. Insults are incredibly corrosive to relationships. They chip away at trust, create emotional distance, make people defensive. The hurt is often felt most acutely in close relationships where we expect care and respect.
Because the betrayal feels bigger.
Exactly. Hurtful communication in relationships can manifest in different ways, making someone feel devalued, breaking relationship rules or expectations, direct verbal attacks. It can really poison the well.
Undermining the foundation. What about groups?
Insults play a complex role in group dynamics. Between groups, intergroup insults can escalate conflict like throwing fuel on a fire. They provoke anger, revenge, reshape perceptions, shift power dynamics.
How do they do that?
Often by trying to strip the other group of any positive social identity, linking them to negative stereotypes, aiming to reduce their perceived legitimacy or power. It's a tool for creating us versus them, often leading to exclusion, hostility, even violence.
Reinforcing those group boundaries negatively.
Precisely. But then, paradoxically, within certain groups, insults can actually strengthen bonds.
How did that work?
Think ritualized or playful insults, like playing the dozens or certain types of banter. When everyone's in on the joke, understands the rules, it can signal closeness, shared identity. It's like saying, we're so tight we can break normal politeness rules.
A marker of being an insider.
Exactly, a form of social signaling. And sociologically, you can also see insults as a form of informal social control.
Policing behavior.
Yeah. Deviance violating social norms often triggers negative reactions. Insults can act as an informal punishment, a negative sanction, trying to push people back into line.
But what's considered deviant changes, right?
Absolutely. It's totally relative to context, time, power structures. What gets you insulted today might have been fine 50 years ago, or vice versa. It often reinforces existing hierarchies.
So it could uphold the status quo.
It can.
Yeah.
Durkheim, the sociologist, even argued that deviance and the reactions to it, like insults, are kind of normal, functional even, because they help clarify norms and strengthen social bonds within the group doing the sanctioning.
So it serves a purpose, even if it's divisive.
That's the complex picture. It can reinforce norms and cohesion within a group while simultaneously being incredibly divisive and damaging between groups or individuals. A double-edged sword.
It's fascinating how our relationship with insults changes as we grow up. Kids' insults are so different from adult ones.
That's so true. Our understanding, use, and how we're affected by insults really evolves. And those early experiences, hugely influential. Think about adolescence. Disrespectful behavior, often including insults, is pretty common then.
Yeah, teenagers testing boundaries.
Exactly. It's tied to seeking independence, testing values, needing privacy, still developing emotional regulation, huge peer influence. They might insult to try and impress friends, assert their identity, or just mimic what they see. They're still learning how to handle disagreements constructively.
A messy process of social learning.
Very messy. But when insults come from caregivers during childhood or adolescence, that can be particularly harmful. Their brains are still developing. They're super sensitive to social feedback.
Right, they're more vulnerable.
Extremely. We talk about early brain insult for physical injury, but the concept of developmental vulnerability applies here too. Consistent, harsh verbal discipline, yelling, swearing, name-calling from parents, research shows it can actually alter brain development and function.
Really, it changes the brain.
Studies link it to increased conduct problems, depressive symptoms later on. Kids who are constantly insulted or belittled risk internalizing those messages.
Believing they are worthless or stupid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can lead to this harsh, self-critical inner voice, damaging self-esteem, confidence. Those external voices become internal ones.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. And the yelling, the abuse, it triggers chronic stress in a developing brain. That can hinder the growth of areas crucial for emotional regulation, logical thinking. The long-term risks are serious anxiety disorders, depression, substance abuse, relationship problems, even increased risk of chronic physical diseases later.
Wow. It really highlights how crucial positive communication is early on.
Absolutely critical. Now, you asked earlier if we're born knowing how to deal with insults.
Yeah, is it innate?
The short answer is no. We're born with the capacity for social learning and emotional response. But how we perceive, interpret, and react to insults, that develops through this complex dance between our innate temperament and everything we learn from our environment, especially those early relationships.
So the gut reaction isn't really instinct.
Probably not pure instinct, more likely a super fast judgment based on years of accumulated social experience, learned patterns, and unfortunately, early exposure to harsh verbal stuff can shape those developing insult processing systems in really unhelpful ways, maybe making someone more sensitive, more vulnerable down the line.
Which underscores why teaching kids healthy coping matters so much.
Exactly, because those early lessons stick.
Now, insults aren't static, are they? What's considered insulting changes over time.
That's a great point. The history of insults is like a mirror, reflecting changing societal values, anxieties, power structures. Even the word insult, from Latin insultare, to leap upon, assail, aggressive from the start.
And specific insults like gestures.
Some have ancient roots. The middle finger goes way back to ancient Greece and Rome. Shows these forms have been around a long, long time. But what society deems taboo, what's truly offensive, shifts dramatically.
Like how religious insults were once maybe more potent.
Definitely. In Western history, blasphemy was a huge deal. Think about the severe punishments meted out. Then the Victorian era shifted focus, becoming very sensitive about sexual and bodily terms. Lots of euphemisms came about.
And today?
Today, while maybe religious swearing is less shocking in many secular places, there's heightened sensitivity around identity-based insults. Race, gender, orientation, ethnicity. These often get their power from long histories of discrimination.
So the hot buttons change with societal concerns.
Exactly. Even profanity evolves. Words that started as religious curses become secular exclamations. Their punch can fade with overuse, and sometimes groups reclaim slurs once used against them.
Turning the insult on its head.
Precisely. Historically, we also see ritualized insults, like flighting in medieval Scotland and England, or modern things like celebrity roasts, rap battles. Shakespeare even had a hierarchy of insults.
So looking back shows us what societies feared, valued, contested.
Absolutely. Insults mark shifting anxieties and power dynamics. The current focus on identity really reflects ongoing struggles for social justice and equality.
So history and society shape the meaning. What about culture? Does that change how insults land?
Hugely. Cultural frameworks around concepts like honor, dignity, and face profoundly shape how we experience and express insults.
Okay, tell me about honor cultures.
In honor cultures, self-worth is really tied up with reputation, how others see you. Both internal feeling and external validation matter. So insults are seen as serious threats to that honor, demanding a strong response, maybe aggression, retaliation to restore face.
Where do we typically see this?
Historically, and in parts of places like the American South, the Middle East, Mediterranean, Latin America, intense shame and anger are common reactions, especially to public insults. Confrontation is more likely. It's about defending that social standing.
A very external focus for self-worth. Yeah. What about dignity cultures?
Dignity cultures tend to emphasize intrinsic self-worth. Your value is inherent, inalienable, not easily destroyed by someone's words. Insults are unpleasant, sure, but less of an existential threat.
So the reaction might be different.
Generally less extreme. There's often more reliance on institutions like the law to handle grievances. Personal retaliation might be seen as improper. Think parts of the northern U.S., northern Europe, more internalized self-value.
Okay, honor, dignity. What's face culture?
Face cultures, sometimes called humility cultures, prioritize social harmony and obligations. Self-worth is often tied to fulfilling your social role and maintaining face, both your own and others. Avoiding embarrassment is key.
So how do insults fit in there?
Self-restraint is highly valued. Reacting aggressively to an insult disrupts harmony. The focus is on group goals, so you might see more anger suppression, seeking reconciliation rather than confrontation. Many East Asian cultures often exemplify this.
Maintaining that social equilibrium. So my earlier question about why people deal with insults differently, culture, is a big part of the answer.
A huge part. These frameworks provide different scripts, norms, values, even emotional repertoires for handling insults. Explains a lot of the variation we see. Plus, remember ritual insults within cultures, like playful banter, non-literal sparring that actually builds bonds.
Right, and the content of insults varies too.
Oh, yeah. What's deeply offensive in one place might be meaningless elsewhere. Certain illnesses in the Netherlands, devil references in Scandinavia, gestures like the thumbs up in some places. Very culturally specific. It shows how malleable our self is in relation to insults.
Fascinating. Let's shift gears slightly. What about philosophy? How do philosophers think about insults?
Philosophy offers some really helpful frameworks. Concepts like dignity and respect are central. Personal dignity, that inherent worth we have as humans. It implies treating ourselves and others seriously, preventing violations of that worth.
Like Kant's ideas.
Exactly. Kant argued our rationality and moral agency give us inherent dignity. We should treat humanity in ourselves and others always as an end, never merely as a means. Insults violate that when they treat someone as less than a person deserving respect. Some philosophers distinguish inherent dignity from respectworthiness based on actions, but argue some insults, like those attacking health or basic humanity, are always wrong because they hit that fundamental dignity.
It's about that core value. What about free speech? Mill's harm principle.
Right. Mill argued power, like censorship, is only rightfully used to prevent harm to others. Mere offense wasn't enough. But modern debates grapple with what constitutes harm.
Psychological harm, systemic harm.
Exactly. So some argue certain bigoted insults do cause sufficient harm, psychological, social, and lack constructive value. So maybe they don't deserve full free speech protection. It's that constant tension.
Between expression and protection. What about belief systems?
Huge influence. Insults targeting deeply held beliefs, religious, political, ethical, can feel like attacks on identity, community, dignity itself, cause deep hurt, social friction. Some argue malicious attacks on beliefs insult human creativity or intelligence. Others advocate for respecting all minds, even in disagreement.
It shows how tied our beliefs are to our sense of self. Now that metaphorical question again, is life itself a dealing with human insult? How does philosophy engage with that?
Yeah, interpreting insult broadly as an affront to our desires, expectations, fairness, life's struggles, suffering, injustice, loss can feel like insults to our existence.
Like life isn't playing fair.
Kind of. Simone Weil saw harm as the offender trying to fill their emptiness by creating one in another. You could extend that metaphorically. Stoicism offers a different take.
Like Epictetus or Marcus Aurelius?
Right. They'd say external events aren't inherently harmful. Our reaction causes suffering. Focus on inner resilience, virtue, acceptance. That's how you deal with life's insults. So while life's hardships lack human intent, the experience can feel like an affront, requiring similar coping skills, resilience, perspective.
So philosophy helps frame both interpersonal and existential insults. Where does the moral line get drawn for actual insults between people?
Often hinges on the impact on personhood. Does it diminish someone's worth? Deny their dignity? Cause tangible harm beyond just offense? That's where Kant's dignity and Mill's harm principle come together to define morally condemnable insults.
Okay. Let's get into the mechanics. Is there specific logic or language structure to insults? How do our brains process them?
There often are linguistic patterns. Insults frequently generate these backward-looking negative inferences. The nasty bit comes at the end, leaving a strong final impression.
Like a punchline, but not funny.
Exactly. And there's usually this unspoken presumption. The speaker is different from and superior to the target. That's key to why in-group versus out-group use of slurs feels so different. The implied superiority is missing within the group.
Context and power dynamics again.
Always. Brain studies using EEG show negative words like insults grab our attention automatically very fast, a strong negativity bias. Later, more detailed processing might adapt with repetition, but that initial grab is powerful.
Our brains are just wired for threats.
Seems like it. fMRI studies on taboo words, including insults, show they interfere with other thinking, increase activity in brain networks involved in conflict monitoring and control. They take up significant cognitive resources. It's work for the brain to process them.
Even if we try to ignore them.
Right. And logically, insults often signal a breakdown of reason. Ad hominem attacks, as we discussed, attacking the person, their circumstances, accusing them of hypocrisy, to quote, these are fallacies. They divert from the substance, often used when valid arguments run out.
A sign the rational debate is over. Now, you asked about AI, helping humans find a better logic for life and dealing with insults, maybe even in the context of death. What's the potential there?
That's a deep question. First, AI doesn't understand life, death, or insults like humans do. It lacks consciousness, lived experience.
So it can't provide existential wisdom?
Not in a human sense, no. But could it help with better logic for dealing with insults? Maybe? By identifying fallacies in real time, modeling constructive communication, analyzing data to show patterns, potentially, yes.
What about the death part of the question? When a human dies, it need to candle. Dealing with human insult.
Interpreting that. If it means the deceased person dealing with insults, no, consciousness ends. If it means the living dealing with insults about the deceased, that's a complex social process, defending legacy. AI could maybe analyze related discussions. If it's metaphorical death that's an insult to life, AI might provide access to philosophical texts, but not inherent understanding.
So AI is a tool for analysis, information access, pattern finding.
Exactly. It can process information related to insults and existential questions based on human input and wisdom, but it can't generate truly novel, better logic beyond what humans conceive. It's a powerful mirror and calculator, not an oracle.
Understood. Let's talk gender dynamics. How does gender shape the insult landscape?
Significantly, insults aren't gender neutral. The types of insults used, who they're aimed at, and what hits hardest often differs based on gender, reflecting and reinforcing societal norms and power structures.
So women and men get insulted differently.
Often, yes. Research shows women might disproportionately face sexist insults targeting gender-specific vulnerabilities, appearance, sexual behavior. Men might more often face insults questioning their masculinity, strength, or competence. But context matters. One Bosnian study found sexual looseness, insults highly offensive when directed at women, by both men and women, but women themselves found incompetence more offensive. Men were hit harder by attacks on masculinity, shows gendered patterns, but also cultural variations.
So it's not universal, but patterns exist.
Right. Compare that to U.S. Norwegian studies focusing on homosexuality or cowardice insults for men, and mentally inadequate was offensive for both genders in the Bosnian study. It's complex.
What about aggression styles or brain responses?
Some research suggests gender differences there, too. Men tending towards more direct aggression, women sometimes more indirect or relational, though provocation can blur lines. Some EEG studies hint at distinct neural responses to aggressive stimuli between genders.
And swearing. Expletives.
Findings vary. Some studies show differences, others don't. Seems highly influenced by culture and context. An Irish English study found different patterns than one at a New Zealand university.
So the takeaway is that insults often police gender roles.
That seems to be a key function. The insults perceived as most offensive often reflect and reinforce traditional, sometimes harmful, gender expectations. They function to keep people in their gender boxes, upholding power structures. Challenging gendered insults is part of broader gender equality work.
A powerful connection. Now let's turn to a darker link. Dehumanization, insults, and violence.
This is absolutely critical. Dehumanization is seeing others as less than fully human, not deserving moral consideration, empathy. It can be blatant, comparing people to animals, vermin, objects, or subtle, denying them complex emotions or agency.
And insults are part of that process.
A key part. Verbal abuse, derogatory language, slurs, they actively construct this perception of otherness, unworthiness, stigmatizing groups as evil, subhuman. It paves the way.
How does it enable violence psychologically?
By lowering or removing moral restraints, compassion, empathy, guilt. These get switched off and bypassed if you don't see the other as truly human. Harmful actions can then seem reasonable, even necessary. Protracted conflict breeds enemy images, where everything the other does is seen negatively, attributed to their inherent evil nature. Projection often happens too, attributing your own negative traits to them.
And the consequences.
Increased aggression, violence, conflict, escalation. History is tragically full of examples where dehumanizing language preceded mass atrocities. Nazi portrayal of Jews, Hutu rhetoric against Tutsis before the Rwandan genocide. Even objectification of women is linked to higher rates of sexual harassment and violence. It shows the danger.
You had a question about cruel people killing others, seemingly not caring about insults, maybe even believing they're saving lives. How does dehumanization explain that?
Right. When you see extreme cruelty, the perpetrators aren't necessarily immune to insults themselves. But dehumanization explains why they don't care about insulting or degrading their victims. The victims aren't seen as fully human, so normal rules of decent treatment, including refraining from insult, don't apply in the perpetrator's mind.
Insulting becomes part of the violence.
Exactly. It's part of the domination, reinforcing their perceived superiority. As for the saving lives paradox, that's often a distorted justification used in genocide. Believing you're saving your in-group from a perceived existential threat posed by the dehumanized out-group. Or it's just a cynical rationalization. Fundamentally, dehumanization bypasses empathy, allowing cruelty.
So the language isn't just words, it's a precursor, an enabler.
Precisely. It shows why combating hate speech isn't just about political correctness. It's about preventing discrimination and violence. The language used about outgroups can be an early warning sign.
A vital point. Now, shifting slightly, what about the physical aspect of insults? It's not purely verbal, is it?
Definitely not. There are direct physical insults, punching, slapping, spitting, obvious physical acts. And insulting nonverbal gestures, the middle finger, the mautza in Greece, carry real physical presence and meaning.
A physical expression of contempt.
Exactly. But even purely verbal insults have that physical dimension we talked about. The stress response activation, HPA, SAM axis, that neural overlap between social and physical pain circuits. These are physical processes happening in the body triggered by words.
And our emotional reactions have physical signs too.
Absolutely. Anger, sadness, fear, even mirth, they manifest physically. Muscle tension, crying, shouting, laughter, heart rate changes, and long-term. Chronic stress from insults leads to those physical health problems, cardiovascular issues, weakened immunity, chronic pain.
It's all interconnected.
Deeply. Some therapeutic models talk about trauma, including verbal trauma, being stored in the body, chronic tension, altered posture, breathing patterns, incomplete fight-flight responses. Body-based therapies aim to release that. Even look at animals' responses to status challenges often involve physical displays, growls, snarls.
So that sticks and stones rhyme is just wrong.
Biologically and psychologically, yes, it's false. Verbal insults trigger physical processes, have lasting physical health consequences, and can be physical acts or gestures. The verbal and physical are inseparable. Underscores the potential for harm and the need for holistic ways to heal and create respectful environments.
Okay, let's pivot to artificial intelligence. This is a new frontier. What can AI actually do right now regarding insults?
AI's main role currently is detection and analysis, primarily through natural language processing and machine learning. Think harmful content, abusive content detectors, often called HAP detectors.
How do they work, basically?
They break down language tokenization, analyze sentiment, look at word sequences. They're trained on huge data sets labeled by humans. Insult, not insult, hate speech, etc. Models like convolutional neural networks, LSTMs, and especially transformers like BERT are common.
And how effective are they?
They can be valuable for moderating content at massive scale, like on social media. Accuracy rates can be high on certain data sets, sometimes quoted in the 90% range, even higher for specific tasks. But there are big challenges.
Like understanding context, nuance.
Exactly. Sarcasm, irony, notoriously difficult for AI. Coded language, slang, reclaimed slurs used within a group, distinguishing playful banter from real malice. AI often lacks that deep contextual understanding.
Leading to mistakes.
Yeah.
False positives, false negatives.
Precisely. Harmless stuff gets flagged, harmful stuff slips through. Plus, there's no single universal gold standard definition of an insult or hate speech. It's complex.
Are there advances being made?
Yes, constantly. Models like BERT are better at context. Techniques like zero-shot classification, analyzing encoded content, using specialized data sets like hate check are helping. But the core difficulty remains. Separating the clear signal of harmful intent from the complex noise of human communication. Over-reliance without human oversight is risky.
It's trying to automate something deeply human. How might AI help us humans deal with insults better?
Several potential avenues. Mitigating online harassment is a big one. Real-time moderation, filtering. Think YouTube's Content ID or Discord bots, but for harmful speech. Scalability and speed are key advantages. Some are exploring AI-generating counter-speech, too.
So cleaning up online spaces, what about promoting empathy or better communication?
That's another area. AI could offer real-time feedback on communication tone, like tone detectors in email. Maybe analyze stress levels in voice or text. Personalized tools for stress reduction or emotional regulation based on interactions. Even virtual coaching scenarios for practicing difficult conversations.
AI in education, too.
Potentially. Customized social stories for kids to understand negative interactions. Discussion prompts for restorative justice circles. Personalized modules on emotional intelligence. But big caveat, AI should support, not replace, human roles like teachers or caregivers, especially in empathy development.
AI as a social prosthetic, maybe.
That's a good way to put it. It can enhance human efforts, provide tools, but it can't instill genuine empathy or eliminate the pain of insults. It's a supportive technology. Your hope for AI making us feel good all the time, that's probably unrealistic.
Right. So how does AI itself understand or define an insult if it doesn't feel.
It doesn't understand in a human way. It performs pattern recognition and classification based on its training data. It finds statistical links between linguistic features, words, phrases, sentence structures, and the labels. Insult, hate speech, humans gave that data.
So it's mimicking human judgment based on data.
Exactly. Sophisticated pattern matching. It doesn't feel insulted, grasp the psychological impact, or understand the social context beyond what's encoded in the data patterns. Its definition is tied to its programmed function, like enforcing platform policies or predicting negative sentiment.
And that depends heavily on the training data.
Critically, which means AI judgment inherits human biases present in that data. It risks replicating, even amplifying those biases. It needs constant human guidance, refinement, auditing.
Which leads straight into ethics. What are the big ethical challenges with AI moderating speech?
Several major ones. Bias, fairness, accuracy are huge. Historical data biases can lead to AI disproportionately flagging speech from certain groups or failing to protect others. Performance gaps exist for less common languages or dialects. Context errors lead to those false positives, negatives.
Okay, bias is one. What else?
Freedom of speech versus harm reduction. That million balancing act. Overly sensitive AI could lead to over-censorship, stifling legitimate debate or expression. Defining harm versus offense for an algorithm is incredibly difficult. Automated enforcement lacks nuance.
And privacy.
Big concern. Content moderation often involves monitoring vast amounts of communication, raises issues of surveillance, data security, potential misuse. AI might even infer sensitive information. Transparency and user control are vital. The risk is automating societal biases under a cloak of neutrality.
Lots to navigate there. Okay, let's bring it back to practical strategies. For individuals facing insults, what works? What are good coping mechanisms?
Psychologically, several strategies help build resilience. Cognitive reappraisal is key, changing how you think about it.
Like the Stoic idea, the offense isn't my reaction.
Exactly. Or trying to understand the insulter's motives, maybe they're insecure, questioning their intent, choosing not to take it personally. Depersonalization. Ignoring it can be powerful. Humor helps laughing it off. Self-deprecating humor can diffuse things.
What about being more direct?
Assertiveness, setting boundaries, calmly stating the behavior is unacceptable. Healthy rumination, thinking it through constructively, not obsessively, can help process it. Owning your vulnerability, seeking support from friends or professionals, and self-compassion, positive self-talk to counter the negativity.
It's about having a toolkit of responses. Now, you asked about AI making life easier so we always feel good when dealing with insults. How realistic is that?
Again, AI can't guarantee constant good feelings. Life involves ups and downs. But AI can support us, reducing exposure through better moderation, providing tools for emotional regulation, stress reduction meditation apps, biofeedback links, facilitating access to human support networks, offering educational resources on resilience. But achieving well-being is primarily a human journey, supported perhaps by AI.
So focus on active coping, reappraisal, boundaries. What about societal approaches? Education.
Crucial. Educating people, starting young, about insults, motivations, impact. Teaching coping strategies, constructively reframing, not escalating. Modeling respectful communication in schools, families, communities, clear norms and rules, focusing on the behavior being unacceptable while validating the feelings of the person hurt.
And promoting empathy.
Absolutely vital. Empathy education, understanding others' perspectives, it benefits everyone, reduces bullying, improves mental health, aids conflict resolution, creating positive environments online and offline. Digital safety education, good moderation, AI can help here. Positive school climates, community accountability. It takes an ecosystem approach.
Individual coping, education, empathy, environment. Sounds comprehensive. Let's zoom in on empathy again. How does it specifically help with insults?
Empathy works both ways. As a deterrent, if you can understand how your words might hurt someone, you're less likely to say them. It fosters kindness, respect. It addresses the empathy deficits often seen in those who habitually insult. Practicing empathy makes you less likely to lash out.
And for the person being insulted.
Perspective taking, a component of empathy, can help. Trying to understand the insulter's possible motives, insecurity, pain, ignorance, like Weil's idea of their emptiness, can help depersonalize the insult. It doesn't excuse it, but might make it less wounding, can facilitate a compassionate response, maybe even forgiveness if appropriate.
So empathy reduces the sending and helps manage the receiving.
Exactly. And AI might play a role here too. Sentiment analysis, feedback, virtual coaching for empathetic communication skills. Empathy is just fundamental for healthier interactions.
Looking ahead then, what's the future synergy between human intelligence and AI in tackling insults?
We'll likely see more sophisticated AI for education, personalized tutors for emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, resilience training, identifying individual triggers or biases.
Better moderation too.
Hopefully. Improved AI moderation that's more nuanced, fairer, trained on more diverse data, better at sarcasm context, distinguishing harm from banter, with robust human oversight and appeal mechanisms. Transparency is key.
Could AI help de-escalate arguments?
Potentially. AI could flag escalating negativity in online chats, suggest respectful rephrasing, provide neutral summaries, guide conversations towards constructive paths. Human-in-the-loop systems seem crucial, AI for initial screening, humans for complex cases. But ethical AI development, fairness, transparency, accountability, privacy has to be the priority.
So a human-centric approach with AI augmenting our abilities.
That has to be the goal. AI empowering better understanding and communication, not a standalone fix. Augmenting human capacity, not replacing human empathy or ethical judgment.
It's been a really comprehensive exploration. To wrap up this deep dive, we've covered a lot of the nature of insults, their deep impact psychologically, biologically, socially.
Yeah, shaped by individual factors, culture, history. We've also looked at AI, its promise, its perils, the vital need for ethics and human oversight.
And circling back to some of your philosophical questions, motivations, consequences, life's insults, AI's role, and ultimately the freedom we have in our response.
It really comes down to that, doesn't it? How we choose to react and build resilience.
Absolutely. And on that note, here's a final thought for you, our listener, to take away. As we navigate this world increasingly shaped by both human interaction and artificial intelligence, how can we consciously cultivate our own resilience and contribute to building a culture where empathy and respect genuinely outweigh that impulse to insult? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
This is DigitView.